Yo, what's up, guys? My name is Hayes alongside Harrison Simeon, and we are back for part 2 of episode 19. We talked about men's basketball yesterday. Let's talk some women's hoops.
Yeah, the women's basketball team, same result. Like I put it in a pretty good way, I feel, in my recap. It was a disappointing form of deja vu. Falling in the Sweet 16 to Iowa, but it was still a really nice run. I mean, we talked about the team's prospects heading into the tournament, on whether their seeding was correct at a 4 or 5, whether they were host or not. And they went into Manhattan and they came out victorious and really in good fashion. I mean, I was very worried about that Drake game. I was arguably more worried about it than the Kansas State because of just how they played. And, JR said that was a completely different team than any team we've faced all year in terms of play style. So really happy with them able to, get those still some 2 tournament wins, get through to the second weekend. And while it ended to Iowa, I mean, right now, at least, you can't really blame anyone for losing to Iowa. Caitlin Clark has just been on another level. Voted the player of the year, somehow not unanimously today. But yeah, I mean, just couldn't with that game specifically. I mean, you wish they could have made some more open shots, especially early on. The offense really undersold what could have been a more competitive game. But sometimes it's a make-miss sport, and that didn't happen, and now some players are hitting the portal. It's the end of Jalen Sherrod's career at CU, but among several other key players. But still, the program looking in the right direction. It's going to be, Sherrod's an irreplaceable player, but you still see a lot of promise. I mean, you have Frida Foreman coming back, Aaron Vonleh assumedly coming back, and just a really good end of the season, even though it was a bit disappointing in that, couldn't make it farther than we did last year.
Yeah, I feel like, weirdly similar about the women's team that I do the men's team, even though it was different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
It's because, like we said, yesterday with the men's team, this is still a really great year in the grand scheme of things as far as women's basketball. And sure, we may have expected, a few things, maybe an Elite Eight berth or something like that. But I think, obviously the end of the season didn't help going on that losing streak.
Yeah.
But also just, looking at that side of the bracket and seeing, even like a team like LSU facing, looking at the season that they had and then having to run into Caitlin Clark, in the Elite Eight, I feel like, maybe it's just a testament to how good, the women's hoops, field is at the moment. But, just specifically that side of the bracket, I felt like that was a little unlucky. Just kind of that weird, disappointment, but still, being happy. I mean, you can never, scoff at a Sweet 16 appearance. I feel like, even if it's, a little underwhelming. I felt like really the kind of, you touched on the, the offense in the Iowa game, but it was, it really just seemed that just Iowa had too much firepower because, Caitlin Clark, she just has such a gravitational pull as far as just because she's so talented as a scorer. And so even though a lot of people might not necessarily think of her passing, she leads the nation in assists for a reason. I forgot how many she ended up with in that game. I think it was like 15.
Yeah, it was.
You saw Colorado getting beat backdoor and Iowa just running some great stuff. And I feel like, kind of the most disappointing part about the end of the season was just that, it felt like we had a little bit of a better chance at Iowa, even though Iowa had another year, just like we did, to, get on track and, build what they've been building for the past few years. And then just kind of for it to not really be competitive after the first quarter. Of course, like in the second quarter, Colorado was sticking around, but I don't know. By halftime, I think the deficit was 11, and in that third quarter was just, something crazy. So So yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like I said, I mean, yeah, overall decent year. Just wish wish some things could have happened slightly differently because they definitely had the chances to.
Right.
Down the stretch of the season or regular season.
Yeah, I mean, the way the season started, I mean, you thought we had a chance to be a number 1 seed. I mean, that was how good things were going after the LSU win, after, we beat Stanford, beat Utah when they were, still ranked in around the top 10. And, you lose to UCLA, you don't think much of it. You gut out the bounce back over USC, and then things start to get a little weird because at that point, you don't have a win that you can really be proud of leading up to March Madness in terms of, in terms of being in that top tier of the Pac-12. You lose to Oregon State twice. You are able to beat Oregon and the Washington schools, but neither of them had, tournament-worthy seasons. And then you have that rough stretch that really just drops you down, and you start to get worried about the team. Don't want to see them crash out or anything. But it was still good to see that when they were faced with a team on that level for the first time since that USC game way back, you saw them come out with the win with the Kansas State game. Because Kansas State, really good team all year. Ranked as high as number 2 in the country, also similarly kind of tapered out at the end of the year, but able to get that 4 seed over us. And you had to go in that road environment. It was really raucous. And I know Patrick and Roberto went out there, had a lot of fun, had a crazy drive back, but made it out alive. And the Buffs did too. They really were tested, but were able to close. Had a really good third quarter, fell flat in the fourth, but were able to just make all those stops. And going into that Iowa game a little bit more, I feel like if they would have won that game, it would have been a game played similarly to how the West Virginia one played out, where it was just gut it out, get a bucket any way you can, where both offenses are struggling. And that's kind of the game Colorado thrives on for the most part. I mean, sometimes they can get in shootouts with people. We scored 92 on LSU, and with the second USC game, we were in the 80s. But for the most part, this is a defensive-minded team, and unfortunately, down the stretch of the season, the defense really got figured out. I mean, I remember them saying in the pregame show we were in the 300s in the nation in defending the three-point line, or in an opponent three-point percentage given up. So definitely some things to address heading into the offseason. Though, you lose Sherrod, you lose Quay, you lose Maddie Nolan, Charlotte Whitaker, and Tamia Sadler. Those are all part of the rotation, and you kind of have to build from the ground up. You have some wings coming in as recruits, and Grace Oliver and Tabitha Betson, but looking forward for this team, it's going to come down to how can we we have the defensive culture, but how can that really translate into the results of those games against the top tier of the teams in our conference, which will now be the Big 12, not the Pac-12.
Yeah. No, I think, I don't know, one thing that was different this year that changed from last year to this year, given that it was such a similar team, is, we keep talking about, I don't know why she all of a sudden left my mind. The girl who was really great on defense last year.
Tiana Jones.
Yeah, Tiana Jones. We talked about, her absence and how that kind of hurt the defense a little bit, but I thought, I think we kind of had a flip-flop of what happened last year, just because we kind of saw the different, kind of the emergence of Aaronette Vonleh this season, and kind of a step back from Quay Miller, which I think just, kind of shook things up and was overall helpful in the beginning of the year, and why we saw such success. And I feel like it also made the defense stronger, just because I felt like, Vonleh, she may not be the most mobile, but I felt like she was good in the paint, contested a lot of shots, and cleaned up the defensive glass really well. But teams were able to get her into foul trouble a decent amount, and be able to work around her on the defensive end as you touched on a little bit earlier, with like the defensive woes that we kind of saw, a little bit later in the season. But then offensively, I felt like a thing that we kind of talked about was just that the spacing, seemed to kind of disappear down the stretch, and teams were really focused on, taking away Colorado's interior, which in hand, also took away the perimeter just because you weren't getting that same type of penetration in the kickouts and whatnot. And so, I don't know. Colorado was really good at the things that they do well, which is why they're so successful, which is why they're able to beat good teams throughout the season, which is why they're able to make another Sweet 16 and knock off Kansas State in their own arena. But I think just at the at the end of the day, I mean, like you said, like basketball's a make-miss game. If Frida Foreman has one of her signature games like she had against LSU, we might be having a different story, or talking about a different story. But I feel like at the end of the day, this team kind of just ran out of layers, I guess.
That's a good
to their offense, because I don't know, teams were able to attack Von Lay and kind of hunker down on the perimeter or on the interior, which in hand, like I said, it took away Jalen Sherrod, who we were thinking maybe she would have a little bit of a better year shooting the ball, but I mean, just never really happened.
Yeah.
And then Frida, she kind of was just a little inconsistent as far as shooting the ball, and you're gonna get that with shooters. I mean, shooting the ball is, I don't know, it can feel so great come out of your hand, and you just rim out a lot of shots. It can feel awful come out of your hand, and you bank them in. It's like, it's kind of a luck thing here and there. Obviously, very skilled. There's a reason why people are the most skillful shooters in the world. But even Steph Curry has goes on slumps, and Caitlin Clark goes on slumps. It happens. But I feel like just not enough. I don't know, diversity to the offense late enough into the season, and I don't know. I feel like they might have gotten a little easy to scout game plan against, and even though they were really good, like I said, and able to win those games in March Madness to make the Sweet 16, I think just against those top teams, like Iowa, and if somehow Colorado was able to beat Iowa, if we were playing LSU again, I'm sure that'd be a lot closer game. It wouldn't be.
Yeah, definitely. They wouldn't. I was already thinking about the possibility of it when we played Iowa. And, that was a team that had so many new players, as good as they were. And, even then, I would have, neutrally maybe sided with LSU. Just because, that the stretch we went on, it kind of started with the UCLA game where we scored in the 60s or lower. I think in 6 straight games. So, the offense kind of got stagnant and then I think around Washington and Oregon we started to move the ball better. We started to, figure things out. And then we went on that losing streak just because of, we went back and previewed that gauntlet of a schedule, 4 straight ranked teams on the road, or besides Oregon State, 3 straight on the road. But, and then they kind of just got a little bit, I don't know, I guess uptight in those close games. And you either saw them have to rally to get back in it, like against Oregon State or Utah, have to play from behind way more than they were used to early in the year, like against USC or UCLA. And, we like you said, they got figured out and easier to game plan against. And for Frida, that was something that really would bum me out. And it wasn't even because she was missing all of her shots. It was just because she wasn't getting as many. And with the offense, how it was, she would kind of fall into those slumps when they weren't getting out in transition and just having to work in the half court. Because, everything kind of connected with their offense. Everything had to go from, Jalen generates the rim pressure to get kickouts. They get entry passes to Nettie to get kickouts. And when those aren't hitting all the time, those kickouts aren't going to be there. And when those shooters are played tight and, they rely more on those one-on-one scenarios, it becomes just, whether you can make the shot or not. And, with I think Quay Miller was another piece that you may have hope to see, play better. I mean, it's not often you see, someone go all Pac-12 their junior year and then senior year kind of fall off. I mean, I know she was still an honorable mention, but in terms of what we could have seen from Quay this year with how good the other offensive pieces were, it was a little disappointing, besides, I guess, the rebounding part of it, because she was still an awesome rebounder. So I think, going forward, you have to imagine, especially without Jalen now, the creativity in the offense has to ramp up. This has to be a big emphasis. Besides, defending the three-point line, besides the defensive woes, there has to be, an area to be addressed in the offensive side as well, because for a long time, that was our issue, was the offense. And this past year, we ended up going all the way up to 30th in offensive rating, despite getting kind of figured out for almost, half the year. But I think, the offense will have to run through Nettie now. I really loved what, we saw from her this year. And, she's now going to be a centerpiece if she, decides to stay, which I assume she will. And she would have to enter the portal. But, to have that centerpiece of an offense that you already had this past year, I mean, you imagine Kendall Wetta will be the starting point guard. Still not sure about shooting guard because Maddie Nolan and Tamia Sadler assumedly leaving, though Tamia Sadler has one more year of eligibility if she chooses to do so. She didn't declare for the draft, so maybe that bodes kind of well for the chances of that. Then you have Frida, who will, have a lot more pressure on her to ramp up her scoring because of all the losses. You lose Quay, you have Sarah Rose as a backup, assuming she stays for her last year. But, this is a team of experience. This is a team that's been together for a long time, even without, with some of that veteran leadership, graduating. I think they're still in a pretty good place heading into the Big 12, which I imagine would be I don't think there'll be any more stretches of having to play 4 ranked teams in a row. I know the Big 12 was a good conference last year. I mean, you had Kansas State, and you saw how he matched up pretty well against Kansas State, at least on the defensive end. And you have Oklahoma, you have Texas. Though no, never mind, they're moving to the SEC. Conference realignment is crazy. But no, I mean, you have Iowa State was another good team. Baylor. You have to deal with some solid threats, but in terms of how we match up with them, I think that we still could do pretty well. I mean, we played Oklahoma State last year too. That was a game, early in the year. We're still trying to figure things out, and we really roared back in that fourth quarter offensively. So for the Big 12, I think we could still be a middle-of-the-pack team, but it's going to come down to, can Nettie assert herself as a centerpiece, and can Frida kind of find more consistency and maybe improve off the dribble a little bit? Because, I mean, you lose Jalen, you weren't necessarily a shot creation team to begin with, but now you lose even more of it because she can just attack the rim over and over, and now you don't have anyone that can do that.
Yeah, and even though, I don't know, that kind of brings up a point that, I've been, mulling over just because, Jalen is such a great player. She was the reason why Colorado was able to win as many games as they were able to win and why they've been successful over the past few years. But I felt like, I don't know, they told her to put on the superhero cape more often than she really needed to. And I felt like, I wasn't able to watch the team as much as you were this year. I mean, you covered, pretty much every game. But I felt like down the stretch, whenever the pressure was on, the offense remained stagnant. It was a lot of, I don't know, it was Sherrod, trying to, play a lot of hero ball.
Yeah.
And so I think, as great as she is, I mean, that's just not really that sustainable unless you're Caitlin Clark, you're Juju Watkins, you're Paige Beckers, and, no offense to Jalen Sherrod, but she just, her worth isn't necessarily all on the offensive end, and neither are, those players that I just named, but, a lot of it comes more on the offensive end where Jalen, more defensive-minded. getting after it, getting out in transition, the fast break, and when the half-court offense, was kind of getting, figured out later in the season, she had to, go superhero mode. I felt like that was really tough. And so I think, into this upcoming year, I think the team will take a step back as far as their record. I don't think they'll see the same amount of success, but I think they'll be all right. And I think it will be, nice for them to, even though Nettie can be a centerpiece, there's not a lot of centers that, you can run the whole offense through them, but you can't. I don't know. There's not a whole lot of centers that you're just consistently going to over and over and over every possession.
You need players to play off, and shooters to play off, and I think hopefully that's what Frida can become. But you also need a consistent everyday point guard. And while Kendall Wetta is a really good player in spurts in terms of her defense, and she can play make, and she has those amazing reverse layups we always see. You're going to need a little bit more, because you saw how much Nettie maybe thrived through the attention that people would still give Quay because of just her reputation, and how, she improved kind of as an all-around player. I mean, you saw games where she would get a bunch of steals, a bunch of blocks, and you hope that she can kind of improve on the defensive end. But it's very rare, like you said, to have an offense that runs entirely through center in the women's. For the women's, I mean, there's Cameron Brink. There, I mean, it was Kansas State with Ayoka Lee, but and then for Jalen, I mean, that was just really tough to see, because she, was never really known for her scoring, and in the Oregon State game, she took 21. The third one in the double overtime game, she took 21 shots. Against Washington State, she took 16 shots. She was never. She could, have those efficient offensive days. Like, she played awesome against Drake. She had, obviously, the crazy Utah game. She played well against Utah both times. But you shouldn't need Jalen to will you back into the game, because that's not what she's there for. She'll always be remembered at CU for the energy, for the hustle plays, for the extra effort, for the, doing the dirty work to get you the win, but not for her scoring ability. And we know for her, she was never able to get a consistent jump shot, even though she got more efficient every year, or besides her first to her second. But she got more efficient. This was her career high in efficiency, career high in free throw percentage and scoring. So, I mean, you saw it kind of improve, but she's still not going to provide on most days, the scoring numbers that you would want to see relative to how much she has the ball on offense a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, one thing that really, speaks volumes to me is, like you said when you were talking about, how fans will remember her. I think you hit it, right on the head. But, for me, when I'm thinking of a Jalen Sherrod basket, you're thinking of an and one that's,
An and one, 90 feet.
Yeah, coast to coast.
Coast to coast.
So, I mean, that's one of the hardest baskets you can get in basketball. And so, that, speaks to, how good Jalen is, but also, to the type of player she was. And so, with just as much offensive reliance she had on her, down the stretch, I think it'll be, interesting next year to, obviously have your offensive pieces, but at the guard position, I don't know, how exactly does this offense change? How does it maneuver? Now not having this piece in Jalen Sherrod, who is very talented, but also, I don't know, will that allow for more ball movement? Will that allow for Frida to get the open shots that, we felt that she was getting, during her junior season, more so compared to, her senior season. So I don't know. Every team has a lot of question marks. I know I kept saying that yesterday with the men's team.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm a lot more optimistic about this team, and I think that, this next year will really be a testament to, we already know J.R. Payne is a great coach, but I think it will be another hurdle in her career to see, what she can do with some of the same pieces, but, obviously, losing Jalen and seeing, just seeing how the offense changes and, maybe even the defense a little bit just because, as we keep saying over and over, Jalen was known for a hustler defense and all those things. And so, Kendall Wetta's, right there, maybe not on the same tier, even though, arguably in some games she may have even been the better defender.
Hey, JR said she's the best defender in America.
So JR, knows better than me. So we'll have to see that. But it would just be, it would be intriguing to see what the offseason looks like. I thought that Sarah Rose Smith and Maddie Nolan were both great transfer pickups for Colorado. So, you wonder what exactly, the transfer portal looks like this year.
Right. I think it's a lot more busy. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, you see, because I was thinking with the depth of this team right now, going into next year, I was thinking of it without Tamia, and I was thinking, Michaela Johnson could be the starting shooting guard. Because I saw, some promise from her off the bench, and just like, she only played in a few games this year, but when she would play, it seemed like, she had some promise, and she had, some ball handling, some shooting that can really be unlocked with more playing time. So it was a little, of a bummer to see she and Brianna McLeod, who I'm about to mention, enter the portal, along with Shellamai Sanders, which I guess is more people have talked about for football reasons than basketball, just because, she never was really going to see the floor, at least in the, upcoming future, next year. Maybe you could see it, but she struggled to find the floor at Jackson State, and I think she'll definitely find an opportunity somewhere. But an interesting move, to say the least, especially with how much I tweeted it out and so many people speculating. But and then Brianna McLeod, who I was going to get to, that sucks too, because I was thinking, she'd be our backup center for next year with Charlotte gone. I really saw her defensive potential was crazy. I really did see it. I think she could have been like that defensive big that Nettie sometimes struggles to be when she maybe, because sometimes she'll just assert herself on one end of the floor but not quite the other. You saw it, I guess, against Kansas State compared to Drake. She was good on both ends, but against Drake, she had that crazy defensive game, like 7 steals, but she wasn't really much of a factor on offense. And then with the Oregon State game in the Pac-12 tournament, she asserted herself on offense, but really struggled against Reagan Beers. So you kind of hope that Bree could have been that piece to, be that rock in the interior. And though she wasn't really much of a factor offensively when in the 50-7 games she appeared in the last 2 years, you still pictured her as part of the team's future. And they're both headed out. It's tough to see, but you would imagine the plethora of positions are addressed in the portal because, and for me, I think I imagine they go out and basically just get another Maddie Nolan because she was such a vital piece of, and added that layer of shooting when she was on, and she really was down the stretch when she would get those looks. She went on a crazy heater. And was unable to make a lot of her looks in the Iowa game, but leading up to it was arguably one of our biggest sources of offense in the second half of the season when things would kind of get stale. So it's you hope to see some shooting added in the portal to play alongside Frida. Because, besides Frida, going into next year, you just think of a potential starting lineup. Even if you include Tamia Sadler, she's not much of a three-point threat. Kendall Wetta, not much of a three-point threat. Nettie, obviously not much. And if it's Sarah Rose, she could take threes when she wanted to, but wasn't able to really find a ton of it. So that you're going to need to find, a knockdown shooter, a really consistent, aggressive shooter in the portal. But I also think you need to find some defensive additions, especially in the front court, because of McLeod leaving, and then you need a power forward that I don't know if Sarah Rose is really fit to be a full-time starter. I mean, even when she was at Missouri and one of their better players, she came off the bench. So I would imagine they go out and find a power forward, and then maybe a shooting guard and a backup point guard. Because unless you go with one of the red shirts or the new players, the backcourt is looking pretty thin. You have Jaden Atchison still, who saw some playing time, had some fun moments at least. Seemed like one of those classic bench mob players. And and when she would come in, she's gone Carmelo, Michael Porter Jr. on him, just give me the rock, let me pull this three. But I would imagine she could find her way into the rotation just from being there and having to watching a lot of the players and playing within more of the flow of the offense once she is actually in it. But overall, I still think we're in a good place, and in a good place to find those players in the portal, because something that is never going to leave as long as JR is there is the culture. She's established a really good culture, a really good bond between a lot of the players, and even though some of the core is gone, and arguably the most important piece of the core is gone, you still have the foundation that you can build off of and find, those other players that want to be part of it.
Yeah. No, JR, she's, she still has, somewhat of a core. She's, built the culture, has the success to, ride along with that. And, especially I feel like with the LSU game early in the year, just being on that national, stage and performing so well and seeing everything that came along with that, I feel like it'd be hard for a lot of players in the transfer portal to not want to come and play for JR in Colorado. So, I don't know. There are some needs, definitely, as you mentioned. But I don't think they'll have, too hard of a time, finding what they need. I think you brought up a good point with the three-point shooting. Just because if you do have if the offense does run a lot through Nettie, which I think it will, she'll see double teams. She'll see help defense, and if she can really stress the defense on the inside, that'll open up that perimeter like we talked about earlier. If there's if Colorado has the knockdown shooters to run around, run off back screens, whatever it may be, to get loose, I think that would not only will it elevate the 3-point shooting, but I think it would elevate Nettie as well, because then that stress the defense, not leave the shooters. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. I think the 3-point shooting is a good call for what Colorado may need. But then kind of backtracking to Brianna McLeod, I felt like that was a really tough player to see hit the transfer portal, because even though we didn't see, she played in a fair amount she played in 28 games, but not a whole lot of minutes. But I felt like when she was in offensively, she was still pretty raw, but defensively she was a lot more mobile than Nettie, and I feel like you might be able to say she's a little raw here and there, committing some fouls in places she might not have needed to.
I felt bad because she, again, in the Kansas State game, that girl put the ball off of her back to beat the first half buzzer. I felt so bad for her at that point, because I'm like, she worked so hard to get these minutes, and it was only in, I think, because of foul trouble.
Yeah.
And then that happens.
That was tough. I was like,
I hope that wasn't the last straw.
But anyway, I was kind of hoping to see the see more minutes from her and see what her defensive upside was really going to look like. Because Charlotte Whitaker, she has been a decent bench piece, backing up, being a backup for the past few seasons, and could hit that mid range, could score a little bit more here and there, but I felt like, she had, the same mobility as Vonleh, if not a little bit less. And, Iowa was able to kind of exploit that in that Sweet 16 game. And granted, that's Iowa, so, it's kind of expected. But
they can exploit anything. I mean, I could go on and on about Caitlin Clark and, like, how incredible she is. But at the same time, there's so much talent everywhere in college women's hoops right now.
Yeah.
So it's, with Iowa coming up as a program, I mean, you hope to see Colorado get to that point of building it up. Though there's only one Caitlin Clark, and you kind of need that kind of player to do it. But you talk. I mean, among the teams in the Sweet 16, we were the only one without a top 50 prospect to ever go, to that was on the team. And with Iowa, it's just Caitlin Clark. That's the only top 50 recruit they had. So, I mean, you hope to see, with recruiting in the future, you have a ton of potential because you have, the coaching skills, you have the national attention that they kind of brought in this past year. You got up to number 3 in the country. I mean, you have a culture not just of like, oh, rah, we're family, every team says that, but you have a culture of success that you've really just brought in almost out of nowhere, but it's been cooking for a while now, and you can see it start to head in the right direction, and hopefully, a lot of players both in the portal and coming out of high school can notice that.
Yeah, and I feel like, going a little step further, like, like you said, every team, tries to, show that culture, their chemistry and whatnot. But, with J.R. Payne, it feels really authentic with the positivity, but also the seriousness that comes with, wanting to win. And just seeing the relationship that she has with her players as well as, like, the community, of CU, but also Boulder as a whole. I mean, people want to go see these games. There's a reason, why they sold out the CU Event Center, like, earlier this year. So yeah, no, I think, Colorado's in a good spot moving forward. I feel like we addressed, like, the needs pretty well, and at this point, I mean, we know as much as as they do.
It's still so early in the off season, but if I have any message to J.R. Payne, go get Talia Van Olhoffen. That if there's any shooter to get, I mean, there's a lot of really, really good players in the portal that the Buffs could go after. So I think they have an array of needs, but are well within the capability of filling them.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see what can happen, and even though I don't expect another Sweet 16 run next year, at least at this point in the off season, it's still really great to see where the program is heading.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just been building over the years, and yeah, I think maybe a step back, this next season, but that's part of every program. It's part of every franchise at the professional level. You're never really gonna see a team unless it's like a prep school like Montverde or something,
right?
Or like Oak Hill, that's gonna, or IMG Academy, that's gonna have like consistent success. But that's
But this was a team that was a bottom feeder of the Pac-12 like a half decade ago, and now all of a sudden we're talking about them as one of the better programs in the country that can, just after a few years of this. So you can see the sustainability of it, just in the coaching, and it's not just like, oh, we had one crazy great player that just went through, carried us to this thing, the tournament, and then just left and it's all gone. Like we have that sustainability, and I think a lot of programs are starting to do that. Even Iowa. I mean, as good as Caitlin Clark is, I mean, you still see how she's affected, how 4 or 5-star players are going to go there. So when you have this culture, that can have just as great of an impact. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like, as much as, J.R. Payne has done, I feel like, you also just look at some of the stories. I mean, you look at Jalen and, being, her story is like a little bit more unique and kind of, almost contradicts her point a little bit just because, she was unknown coming out of high school. But, seeing, JR stick by her side for 5 years and, seeing the player that Jalen turned into. But then also just, seeing the other pieces, Frida Foreman and Arenat Vonleh, like, even though Vonleh has only been around 2 seasons, like, I don't know. You see the trust that JR has in those players, and I feel like, as a college basketball player, you see that and you're like, that's someone I want to play for. So, as much as I want to, keep hyping up JR because I think she's done a really great job, I fear I may be getting redundant at this point.
No, I mean, it's you can't speak enough about how much he's impacted the program. And, even though there's going to be some changes upcoming, as we have a little Brian bomb after I talked about her 5 minutes ago, Jaden Atchison is headed to the portal as well. So we don't, barring Tamia coming back, we don't have a single shooting guard in the roster. Besides, I don't know. I'd have to look up the positions the red shirts are from this past year. But it's tough to see. I mean, Michaela and Jaden were, such – I felt like they really provided, like, all the great celebrations on the bench. Yeah. So tough to see them go. But, yeah, still, I mean, we still have a very bright future. And I think even though they're going to have to fill a lot of spots and have, a lot of unfamiliarity compared to this past year where they basically had the same exact team, they have continuity in coaching. You haven't seen many assistants leave in the past couple of years. I mean, you have continuity in coaching, continuity in just the way they play. Even though you saw the increase in offense, you still have the defensive identity that you can build off of. And you could see that, if a player is more offensive-oriented, you could see, hey, this team was a really good offensive team. And if you're defensive-oriented, you could say, oh, this team's foundation is the defensive end. So lots of things that you can still be happy about heading forward. And, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to really add. But Jalen Sherrod we could also add that Jalen Sherrod is a college all-star. She'll I don't know when the last time that happened for us or how new the college all-star game is for women's, but she'll be playing on Saturday in the Final Four or in Cleveland at the Final Four area. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, good to see one last run from Jalen. I mean, with everything she's given to the program and the school and the community, I mean, yeah, just always rooting for Jalen. And
I'll be an instant fan of whoever she's drafted by in the WNBA. And, I think we've talked about her chances because of how difficult the WNBA can be, even if she struggles. I mean, her time here as a student, working on a second master's degree is incredible. And just, the interest in, criminology, I think it was, and hearing about that when we talked to Corey a while back, I mean, she's been just kind of a legend in terms of Colorado. I mean,
yeah,
I could envision her number getting retired. That's how.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see it as well.
Program. In terms of her story, she was incredibly emotional after the Iowa game about her time here and how she said nobody can take her past 5 years away from her, and even though she was never anyone that would fill up the box score more than once in a blue moon, her just pure raw impact goes no bounds, and I wish we were able to have her on the pod.
Yeah, no, that'd
been maybe now that the season's over, who knows? But next week we should have a special guest.
Yeah,
special-ish.
Yeah, specialist only
special
because
to the extent of when we had Patrick on.
Yeah, just because not to say that our special guest isn't special, but y'all have seen him before, so
yes, we won't reveal who.
But I don't know. Seems like a good stopping point. Yeah. Got I feel like got our thoughts out about the team, about the season, what next year will look like as I don't know, with what we know at this point in the off season. So. I'm Oliver Hayes.
I'm Harrison Simeon.
And as always, you heard it here first. Peace.